Thank you. My name is Jürgen Bokeroff. I'm working for ARD, which is Public Service Broadcasting in Germany. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but I had the impression that you're trying to direct our direction now, our discussion more now into the field of concrete proposals to policymakers. Actually.
Exactly.
So if you allow me in that context to make a few remarks of what we're actually supposed to do here. And what are the basics of what we're supposed to do. Actually, we were here yesterday and today to help shape an agenda on cultural policies of the European Union, actually. Now, we should know and have some common understanding of what is the basis and what are the terms of reference, actually, here. The basis of cultural policies is laid down in actually the EC Treaty. There is Article 151, which provides for a certain mechanism to run cultural policies. But there's another very important thing, and that is paragraph 4 of that one, which is saying that actually the community should take into account cultural aspects in other community policies, actually, like, I don't know, whatever, regional policies, media policies, and so on. And that's a very important, important issue. And my first practical advice or hint would be that we ask the European policymakers to have a very broad conception of a cultural aspect to be taken into account in other fields of policymaking, like, for example, in the fields of media or audiovisual policies, like having cultural aspects in applying competition policies, for example, or state aid policy. Even if it comes to, let's say, regulation of telecommunications or infrastructure, so that we really have a broad understanding of let's say, culture and the significance of cultural aspects in other policies. And actually, there is some interesting momentum actually generated by the UNESCO Convention on Cultural Diversity when it comes to this aspect, because the European Commission has ratified that convention on behalf of the European Union. So now the question is, what does that mean in creating European policies with respect to, let's say, a culture or other policies that have some significance for culture? As you can read in the communication of the Commission on that cultural agenda, it is said that there is a inter-service group been founded that is to deal with that. Now, it could be very interesting to know what are they doing, actually, and how does the convention impact somehow on cultural policies in the European Union. So we could ask, actually, this afternoon, the policymakers, I mean, what's going on there? What are you doing there? That would be the one point I wanted to raise. The second one, when we are here to initiate a cultural dialogue with policymakers, we should be clear on the terms of reference, actually, and we should be clear on let's say, the rules of the game. The Commission, so far in its communication, is saying, well, we would like to initiate that. And there should be broad consultation and dialogue and whatever. But the question is, for what purpose and to what end? Dialogue itself is a fine thing, but finally it should impact on policymaking somehow. Now, what are the mechanisms, actually, of what we're doing here? How much is the Commission, for example, or the member states, how much are they willing that there is an impact of what we are discussing here on concrete policy making, on concrete regulation, for example? There's actually no word about that in the communication, so we should ask them. I mean, how to go on with that? There is one aspect with respect to that, and it has been already mentioned here. This is that what you call the open method of coordination. Well, you could argue that initiating a dialogue and at the same time having that open method of coordination, there is some contradiction in that. Because actually, I mean, what is the mechanism of that method? This is that where there is no, let's say, common ground in the treaties for common European policies, member states can get together around a table and say, look, might we want to coordinate here and there and I don't know where a bit our policies, but they do that behind closed doors. There are representatives of the member states, there's the Commission, and so on. But there's at least some lack of, let's say, transparency of what they're doing there. You could even go so far and say there is some lack of democratic legitimacy or participation. And this is, for example, why recently the European Parliament has taken a very critical stand on that open method of coordination. So, I mean, we could ask the representatives this afternoon, I mean, what are you intending to do there? Then there is one point I wanted to raise, because you labeled it yesterday, instrumentalization of culture or culture policies or the cultural sector. As you can read in the communication, culture is to support the Lisbon agenda. Actually, culture is taken as an important tool to bring about or to reach the objectives of the Lisbon agenda. Now, the Lisbon agenda is mainly an economic agenda. It is to grow. Let's say economic, or to grow the economics in Europe, to have new jobs, and so on and so on. So I mean, you could argue that there could be a tendency of instrumentalizing, let's say, culture for purely or predominantly economic terms. Now, shouldn't we confront them with that question? I mean, and what is the consequence of that? Is that whenever, let's say, a cultural activity isn't producing added economic value, then it's not valuable at all. Is it prevented from getting some kind of support from European sources or something like that? So that could be another important issue. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You raised some very important questions here. One of them underlines what was mentioned by several people yesterday, and which I think really should be a part of our report. I turn to my colleague here, which is pluralism of the structured dialogue. They have proposed in the communication on culture that there will be a structured dialogue with the cultural sector, and they have encouraged us to bring ourselves together into very clear partners in this dialogue. However, I think that several of us have said, and I would like to believe that most of us agree, that a structured dialogue with only one representative of the entire sector will not function. That there are different, now we can help by coordinating ourselves, and we should strengthen ourselves as a sector by having some different voices, but it must be a pluralistic structured dialogue and not aimed at only one. So I think that that's a very important point that you bring up. As far as the transparency of the open method of communication, I don't know if there's anyone that can say anything. I know from my experience that the Commission wants to be very transparent in this question. They want this open method of communication to actually lead to people knowing what is going on and what's being discussed and what common agendas are being created. However, I don't know if there is a structure for that.